Hello, and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup, a conversation about life, the universe, and anything in between. I'm Megan Rounds, and welcome to today's show. Okay, today's guest can be found here in the main lab and soon in the light room as well, and has been a member of the Lightworkers Lab for 2 years. Her main modalities include claircognizance, which she's always had, and 2 more that have recently emerged, clairsentience and clairvoyance, especially in the form of symbols. She lives in Greene County in southern Indiana with 2 of her 4 boys, CJ age 15 and Christian age 6, along with a pretty little long-haired Dachshund, Cabela, and 2 young black cats, Ashes and Sooty Girl. They live in a 70-year-old house that she bought last December, which had never been updated, so she plans to do as much of the work as she can by herself. Her other 2 boys are all grown up and in their 30s. One is 36 and the other is 34. She has 3 immune diseases and is considered totally disabled. But with a slow and steady pace, her daily routine focuses on her kids' needs, managing her health, building a lightworker business, and updating her home a little bit at a time. Please give a warm lightworkers welcome to Cathy Sue Sylvester. Hi, Cathy Sue. Welcome.
Hi, Megan. Hi, Lightworkers Lab.
How are you doing today?
I'm a little nervous.
Nervous.
Just
Okay,
a little
everyone,
bit.
everybody send calming, positive, uplifting energy to Cathy Sue. Oh, you look wonderful, and it's so nice to see you and to have you on the show.
I feel really privileged to be able to do this today. Thank you for inviting me.
Sure. I hope you're feeling the love because there's a lot of it coming through for you. This is awesome. Well, what did you think of that last good news story? Are you thinking about getting a porcupine now?
No. I don't think so. I think we have enough pets. I really like the first good news story because actually this morning I was going through my history of work and I was thinking how I've always been in a helper industry. I've always helped people. Usually work for not-for-profits, work with teenagers, addictive women. I've done homeless work. I worked with people with developmental challenges. But one of my first really long-term jobs was as a waitress.
Really?
I've worked the late night shift at a Waffle House in Bloomington, Indiana.
Oh, that must have been a fun one.
It was pretty crazy.
I love hearing that because when I pick the good news stories, I don't go out to, I just look to see what's out there and what feels like it might fit with the show and the guest. So hearing that there's that connection is really awesome. I love knowing that. In fact, the Dachshund one that I found,
yes,
I found before realizing that you have one. And then I'm like, all right, that really works.
Yeah.
So
love them.
Thank you. Okay, so for those of you who can hear the dogs in the background, those are mine. They always seem to like to chime in when I have a show going on, and we're expecting a delivery today, so that's probably why they sound the way they do right now, because somebody's walking up our driveway. They usually don't like that much. But hopefully they're not too loud.
It doesn't bother me.
Good. Okay. Well, let's go into the big question that I always ask first-time guests, which is to, tell us a bit about your spiritual journey, your story around that, and if you can add in how you found your way to the Lightworkers Lab, that would be a nice added bonus.
Yeah, by the time we get through it, you might have to remind me about that last part.
Oh, sure.
Well, I was always very connected to nature. As a little girl, I was kind of a little boy. I was a tomboy. That's what you called little girls like me back then. It's not really so PC now, but yeah, I was tree climbing, little barefoot, crawling through the briars, back in the backyard with the coon. We had hound dogs. We had coon dogs in the backyard. Very down. I just loved dirt and stink and playing and trees, and we didn't have a lot of money, so we made stuff we played with. So that was kind of my connection when I was young. And then around holidays and things, my grandparents, my great grandparents, my granny and papa were very involved in a Pentecostal church, and it's really common in our area. So we would go. I really never resonated. Like, I would sit in church and they would take us back into the class and they would teach us all these things. And I wasn't so much of a non-conformist then. I would listen, but in my head, it just didn't work for me. I was like, it just didn't feel true. I'm not saying that it's not for them. I don't want to disrespect their beliefs, but it never felt true to me. I never believed in hell. They talked about a lot. I never really believed in heaven per se as they would share it. So it just never, they kind of scared me. I remember having some fears. There was one man in the church that was missing some fingers. And I remember as a child thinking that they had cut his fingers off because it was so dogmatic. It was so, it was just not, it wasn't a loving thing. If you didn't believe exactly as they believed, then there was hell to pay, literally. So it just never felt good to me. I never could get into that. And a lot of my family are in that still, and that's fine. I'm cool with that. I try to always, with any religion or anybody's beliefs, I try to let them be where they're at. I think that's really important. They are, I can share a certain amount of what I believe. Not everything is really acceptable. I mean, it's not accepted in the area I'm in. But,
Sure.
But I love people who have beliefs that don't match mine. I love tons of people, thousands of them, that don't believe the same way I do, and that's good. A good thing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I love that perspective of allowing them to, from your point of view, allowing them to be where they're at, not expecting them to embrace your beliefs, but also hopefully they're not expecting you to embrace theirs. And
Right.
I think those are the foundation for the best relationships.
They try. they still, I mean, they're like, hey, but it's just not my jam at all. So I'm good with it. I feel at peace with it. It's not something that I'm worried about at all. So we were really poor. We struggled. We didn't have running water when I was a kid. Like, we were that poor. My mom did laundry in a wringer washer in the front yard, kind of poor. Sure. We took baths in a like old wash tub on the back porch. We had a pump for our water till I was probably about 10 before we had running water. And so that's how life started. It was simple. Everybody worked hard. My family are really hardworking, really good-hearted, giving people, and I've been very fortunate to be born into that family. I feel that they just were just awesome human beings. And it continues today in my family. The newer parts of the family are the same way. They just have huge hearts. So.
It's so nice to hear you say that. It just really is. Gratitude for, the family, the people that you grew up with and who raised you and who you were around when you were growing up. It's just really nice to hear that.
The core, we've had our problems. There's been a lot of alcoholism and drug addiction in the family. My mom's second husband was extremely abusive, and he actually adopted my brother and I, and I think I was about 14 when they divorced. It was just a really, really, although we were rising in society, he graduated IU with a master's in law and was an attorney, but as things got to that point, all hell broke loose. I mean, it was not good. It was one of the lowest points in my life. And I remember very well being extremely suicidal. I'll call him my stepfather because he never was really a father. At the time, he would buy alcohol and marijuana for my brother and sister and I. And I can remember my brother, Kevin, he's passed now. He was maybe 10 or 11. He was still very much a little baby boy, being extremely so drunk that he was passed out and vomiting on himself as he was just a little guy. So that was after they split. That was kind of it was just bad. So at that time in my life, I remember being extremely suicidal and actually thinking about ways to in my life. I just could not feel a way out. We lived. I remember have moved to a town down farther in Indiana, even farther south, and we lived in a huge house. It was an old Victorian home, and I would hang out in the carriage house. There was a carriage house because it was that old, and I would think I'm going to hang myself in this carriage house. It was just something that I just thought about a lot. But there were some good things that happened there. So I will get to the good part of that. There was a magnolia tree outside my room, a huge magnolia tree.
Lovely.
And that magnolia tree, it's not there anymore. There was a tornado came through and destroyed everything, and the house is gone.
Wow.
It's gone. But I remember that magnolia tree. It was one of the first trees that really I felt so connected with, that it comforted me. It connected with me. I was so distraught and so I just didn't know what to do. I felt so lost, and it was really, being lost is kind of a theme in my life. I never had a lot of friends. I never really had. I would have like one friend maybe. I spent so much time alone. I spent so much time being beat down by people around me. The kids were mean. There was something different about me, and they knew it. And so they didn't like that. They were aggressive towards that part of me. I refused to change. I refused. And so the tree comforted me. And so I remember it blooming in my whole bedroom smelling like magnolias. So magnolias are a thing for me now. Like the smell, the scent, and the scent will come to me sometimes, even when it's the middle of winter. That tree, even though it's not there anymore, we're still connected. So I'm getting chills talking about it. I'm getting goosebumps.
Me too.
It feels so good. So it comforted me, and that and my Carole King Tapestry album got me through those years. I really struggled through my teens, and then
that Carole King album is something that I keep hearing in very different places. There was some podcast or thing on our public radio station where someone was just couldn't say enough about that album. And I love Carole King, but I haven't heard the album, so I think I'm going to have to. That'll be in the show notes for sure.
iTunes. She saved my life. That album and that tree and just a few little things that were going on saved my life, because around that time also my uncle was killed in a car wreck. He was about 9 years older than me, and he was my hero. He was like a big brother to me because we lived right there by them when I was growing up. So his name was Tony, and he was just everything for me. He was my one person that I looked up to more than anything. And he was killed in a car accident. He was 23.
Oh my God.
22, 23. He had just gotten out of he had been in the airborne. He was an airborne. And so he had just gotten out. He was a paratrooper and just gotten home. He'd been home a while. And he was thinking about going back in. And he was killed in a car accident. So at that point in life, things were that's about the lowest that it could get. I remember my brother thinking that he was driving. I think my brother saw things as well. My brother Kevin, and he's my only full sibling. I'm the oldest of 10 children. but
Wow.
but I grew up with three. So
Okay.
my brother Kevin and my sister Crystal. And I think Kevin had sight, and I think it was really difficult for him. And he became more of a recluse as he got older. But I remember not long after Tony had died, my brother thought he heard him. He was up one night. He was 12. Kevin was about 12, and he was saying Tony's driving around the block on his Harley. He could hear him. He knew that he was there, and it freaked me out. But now that I look back on some of the things that Kevin said that kind of startled me and kind of threw me were probably things he actually saw, and actually I think he actually had conversations with spirit, because he would just start laughing about stuff. And I would be like, "What are you laughing about?" And he's like, "Oh, nothing." But now I do that. So
So do I.
I mean, like there's a comedian kind of thing going on sometimes with the way that I interact with my higher power. So, and I think he had the same thing. I realize a lot more now, especially now that he's passed, and I think he's given me those messages
Yeah.
to tell me that. But so when I was 15, I had a baby.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so that's how I have children that are in their 30s. When I was 16, I got married. And when I was 17, I had another baby. And so,
Wow.
and
I can't imagine.
when I was 18, I lost my mind. I pretty much went off the deep end, and I went on a journey. I mean, a physical journey, and took off and traveled and did some pretty crazy things. I lived in my 72 Pinto. Of course, reminder, I was drinking and drugging back then. I got it all over early. And
Yeah.
I lived in my 72 Pinto on Venice Beach for a while, in Venice, California. And then I came back. I called my grandma one day. I'm like, I just want to come home. They didn't even know really where I was. And so they got me back home. I got sober. I got into detox. I got sober. I got into recovery, into mostly AA. And that's where I found out I was 18, so I was still 18, 19 years old, that they told me, pick a higher power. It can be anything. You don't have, this is the first time that anybody ever told me that I could believe what I wanted to, and it was okay. And I was like, okay, I'm home. It was just like this huge weight lifted off of me when they told me, just pick something. It's okay. Whatever you want to believe, talk to that. Let it be your support. You need that to help you. They told me I needed a higher power, and then I needed to be honest. Those were my bottom line things, was that connection and honest, and to be honest.
Wow. Well, and that permission, that's been a resounding theme with me, a reoccurring theme with me this year, is that permission. Because until getting to that point of realizing that I can grant my own permission, which at my age I can definitely do that. And even younger though, it's like, I don't have to believe these other things that people say. That opens up a whole new universe,
Right.
And then then I start questioning everything. And then it's like, hey, wait, I don't have to believe that. That's where mindset comes from. That's why I'm so into mindset, because it's like, hey, wait, that isn't my stuff. I don't have to own that. So keep going. I just want
So I'm still really pliable. I'm 18 years old, even though I've lived a lot of life. Up until that point, I was 18. So it was like I kind of goofed around, and I finally really started getting into it, and finally really got sober when I was 21. So my sobriety day is October 23rd of 88. In case anybody out there is recovering, it is possible. So, you know, it. They told me things, and that was my first, and a long-term spiritual connection was through that program, through a 12-step program, because they told me, take what you need and leave the rest. They taught me those basic things, an inventory, you know, to do an inventory, to clear a path, to clear out the junk and make room for more spirit, you know, to make, and to help others. There were really basic things that I learned there that have helped me so much through my life now. And now that I'm into this kind of work and still trying to help people, you know, I want to help. That's been the thing that saved my life, and is to try and help others. And so that's what my goal through, I mean, I want to feel good too. What I have gotten. So I got really sick in my 20s, and I started having severe pain. I didn't sleep. I struggled really. Like I couldn't, if when I had a job and when I worked, that's all I could do. That was it. I mean, there was nothing else. Everything, I had to plan for everything in my life. And nobody could tell me what was wrong. Around that time, you know, they talked about fibromyalgia some, but they were like, well, you need to have had like a severe physical trauma. And there were like all these strings attached to having an autoimmune disorder like that.
Wow.
So I went through years and years of testing, and nothing showed up, and, you know, nothing would show. And finally they just threw a label at me, and they were like, okay, it must be this, it must be fibro. And so I've kind of hauled that around for, I don't know, what, 20, 30 years now. I was glad to get an answer at that point. I was like, okay, at least I have a name for it. I'm not crazy. There is something really going on here. This is happening to other people enough that they have a word for it. And, you know, after I got into Lightworkers Lab, I found out that there's a word for it too, and it's called ascension symptoms. And, you know, so when I got here in the Lightworkers Lab, I knew I was home. You know, everybody, I was like, I can't remember how many people were here when I came into the lab, maybe 600, 700, 800. I don't know. It was under 1,000, I know. There was like all these people that were just like me. They talked like me. They had the same physical problems with me. They struggled with the same things as me. And then they were talking about the most beautiful things that I had ever heard in my life, and that they all just felt so good to me. They felt so right. And I was just like, oh my God, this is my spirit family, you know, this is where and then I can see now everything that's happened over these years has led me to this point. And since, you know, I've been here, you know, and they tell me the same things that I heard all those years ago, that I was like, oh, thank God somebody told me I can believe what I want to. It's okay. You don't have to agree with everybody else's beliefs. Take what you need and leave the rest. It's okay to do that. And I am so grateful. I'm so, so grateful. You know, my life has just exceeded any expectations I could have had in my life. When I came here 2 years ago, if you'd have told me my life would be what it is right now, I would have been like, you are nuts. No way. No way. I was in a really stifled situation. I was in a lot of fear. I was not feeling well because of my stress. I didn't sleep. I actually had sleep studies done at that time that showed I got no restorative sleep at all. I was extremely stressed. I had 2 children I was raising that I had no legal ties to. They had come into my life, and I was like, okay, this is and I hear people when I was in AA that, you know, you get those opportunities. I was like, okay, this is a chance to do some living amends and to heal some things in the universe and me, and in these children that I have now. And they are awesome. I mean, they've been such a blessing to me. And at that time, I didn't have any security with them. So I stayed where I was with them, even though it was not a good environment for me or for us to be in. It was hard. I'm not, it wasn't physically abusive or anything like that, but I want stagnant's the words that's coming to me, but it was, there's like a dark cloud over it. It just didn't feel, it was sad. It was hard. There was a lot of anger and stressful things going on all the time. And I was afraid. I knew if I left that I was going to lose the kids. So I stayed.
Yeah.
So I worked really hard
Super
to stay
scary.
there. And I don't think if I had been in the lab that I would have been able to maintain the strength that I needed to be able to stay there and wait out until the kids were legally my children, and which they are now. I've adopted them, and they are my kids. They are my sons. Yes, thank you.
So, do you mind my asking, what were some ways that you coped with that? I mean, even though it wasn't an abusive relationship, it sounded like, I mean, kind of the sense I got was you had to use all that you had to stay, to endure, let's say.
Yeah, there was some verbal abuse, definitely. I mean, it wasn't severe, but it was enough that it was harming. It was definitely harming to my soul, to my heart, to my sense of well-being, to my self-esteem. And I tried to stay in the relationship. I really wanted it to work, but you can't change other people.
Yeah.
They have to want to change themselves. And so finally it was time to go. And after, the kids' security was there, because I could never have left and let them go back to where they had originally come from. I don't think that they could, especially the little one, I don't think he would have survived it. They were very frail and tiny and sick kids when I got them, and they're very, even though they still have some difficulties, and I think that their difficulties there's a reason for all that. I see that just like my life and my difficulties, there's been a reason. They are robust, intelligent, very intuitive little boys. Well, one's not so little. He's taller than me now.
But, it's quite the blessing to have you as their mom, too, because you can empathize with probably most, if not all, of what they're going through. And what a gift.
Yeah, and I can share that with them. I can say, this, when I was a little boy, this is what happened to me. So.
For those of you who didn't hear the early part of Cathy Sue's story, she talked about being, I only know the term tomboy. That's what I was as well, and the one I used, and I kind of wore it like a badge. I was happy to be that, climbing trees and playing around in nature and things like that. But that's where that boy relationship, I love that. Circling all the way back to that is brilliant. Well, so, okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I'm fine. No, I'm just thinking about them. They're awesome kids.
Well, and it's great. I love that they're in your life, and you seem so happy. You can see you light up when you talk about them. That's just wonderful. It's clearly meant to be.
They are my whole heart. They really are.
Now, how? There's a couple of questions. One is, there's a big gap between 20s and now, if you are interested in exploring, or maybe that's just the zone that nothing happened.
We can explore. I mean, it was just mostly being in recovery. So being in 12-step program, doing all those things, the 12 steps over and over and over, and working through, just clearing a lot of clutter out of my soul. literally my heart and soul. I cleared a lot of junk out of there, and you know, uh,
Do you find that? Go ahead. Do you want to finish what you
I
were
was
going
gonna say, you know, and a lot of like crappy relationships and things and lessons learned and things that I needed to know. Things that all that stuff was just my whole journey. If I look now, it's just every bit of it has been so important to be where I am today. At the time,
yeah.
I didn't know.
No, and I think that's such a big, important point. I'm finding the same is true for me with things that have happened along the way. Had they not happened, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I know that the things that are happening today are in preparation for something else tomorrow that I cannot see yet. And knowing, being able to look back at some of the things in my life and saying, wow, you know, I had no idea at the time how things were going to turn out from that, and they turned out really well, helps me now with this a huge amount of uncertainty that I haven't had in such a long time, with people like a child that make me more anxious about it. If it were just me, I don't think I'd be as bothered by this level of uncertainty, but because, you know, of my daughter and just, you know, and people depending on me and stuff like that, it's like, well, I don't know. And then it's like, oh yeah, but remember, everything has a purpose, and I don't have to know what it is. The, you know, the universe has, you know, my source has it all planned out, and I have to let go of the need to control. It's a constant reminder there. It's not when I can say it now and then in 3 hours, I may have to remind myself again, because it's like, okay, I know it, but it's still hard when living in the moment. And I love that you are able to see that now in your life, just how everything does play into the now. And it continues to.
Yeah, and you know, you said the need to control. I call it the illusion of control.
Yes, and it is.
Really, we have no control.
Yeah.
I mean, our control is just a little bit, and mostly it has to do with what's right here, right inside of us, and what we are physically doing at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's some aspect to choice making, you know, pathways. But the problem for me is that then I can get paralysis around that, because I know every choice leads to something, and I don't always know what that's going to be. In fact, most of the time I don't. I mean, I kind of have a forward thinking thing, and I have some precog, but it doesn't work as well for me as it does for anything else. And I think that's probably by design. If I knew my own fate, then I would, you know, I don't know what I would do. It depends on the fate, but you know, I never get to see that. I see some other things societally and stuff like that, but not specific to me. And I wonder if that's the case for most people who have that that gift. Is, do they see their own? I mean, in movies they do sometimes. I don't know, I'm going off in a rabbit hole there,
Okay.
but it's like, yeah, you know.
My grandma's tapping on my shoulder. She's saying, hey, what about me? What about me? Let me, you were saying that gap.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, I have my grandma Crystal. She was like the coolest lady ever. She was my best friend. She's back here saying, hey, you gotta talk about me. Let me talk about grandma, because she was a really important part of my spirituality and my journey.
Can I just say I love her name is Crystal?
Yeah. And well, first of all, let me tell a little bit of her story. My grandma was born into a really poor family. They had a bunch of kids, and her dad, there was like an age difference between her father and her mother of like 30 years, I think.
Wow.
His wife had died, and he kind of picked up my grandma. She was like 14, 15 years old, maybe.
Wow.
He was friends with her father. So, because I come from Appalachian culture, and that's kind of the way things are. And like in my family, there are generations of women who were married at 15. It is not uncommon, and it goes back, and 5-generation pictures are very common on both sides of my family, on my biological dad's family and my mom's family. So anyway, grandma was born at home, and she was named after the lady who helped deliver her. The lady's name was Crystal.
Oh.
And when Grandma was born, she was born with what they call a cull. She was born with a veil on her face, and that was it's supposed to, especially in Appalachian cultures, believe that a baby born with a veil is a seer. They're a natural born seer. And a lot of times, if it wasn't noticed, the baby could suffocate before. So anyway, Grandma was born with a veil. Very important with Grandma, because Grandma was a seer, because Grandma knew things always. She was really important to my being able to be myself, and I got to tell you, I was a wild one. I was a little wild child, and Grandma just loved me so much, exactly as I was always. She was my whole world when I was a kid. Everything was about Grandma. And my mom, she took care of me, and Mom said she had a prayer when I was a kid, was God help me take care of Cathy Sue, and I'll take care of the other two all by myself. So that's to give you an idea of how crazy a wild kid I was. But Grandma became my best friend throughout the years, even after all my addiction issues and all the I did not so good things then. She loved me always. I could always go to Grandma. She might give me a little guilt trip, but she always loved me. She wanted me to be the best that I could. That's all she wanted for me. She didn't really care what it was. She wanted me to be happy. And
That's awesome.
Yeah. So when things really started shifting as far as getting out of the recovery program and more into more spiritual things, was right around the time that my grandma passed away. And my grandmother she passed away from brain cancer. She had metastasized to all of the nerves in her brain. It just started. She fell, and then she went deaf. We didn't know what it was. It took a while for us to get a diagnosis, and this brain cancer was traveling up her nerves in her. So she went deaf, and we kept her at home. My mom and my aunt and I, and we took care of her at home. And then we got in trouble one time for taking her to the hospital. She was dehydrated, and we paid dearly for that. So we didn't do that again. But
from her?
She was mad. She was pretty mad. And so we kept her at home and took care of her. And it was mostly just the three of us. And it was, our society death is so sterilized and institutionalized, and it's so sad for everybody that it's like that. So I'm going to tell everybody right now, if you get a chance to take care of somebody that you love and help them pass with some grace in their environment that they wish to be in, then by all means do that, and give every bit of what you've got to do that, because I think it was really important, not just for Grandma, but for all of us. Because by the time it was ended, it wasn't a bad thing. It was sad because we miss her, but it's what she wanted. And she knew, she knew what was going on. And so the night that Grandma passed, I love this story because it was so surreal, as people say. She died June 2nd, and the night before, it was hot, but we had just decided to open all the windows in the house. And Grandma was unconscious. She had gone into a coma, and it was just, we knew that it was coming, and Mom and my aunt and I, we could tell. And that night, as it got dark, 3 mockingbirds came to the house, and they sat around the house all night, and they sang, and they sang, and they sang. And Grandma had not been, well, Grandma and I were always, the birds were always so important connection for us. And like I would call her when I'd see the first robin. Oh, Grandma, I saw a robin. Or if I saw a bird I didn't know what it was, I would call her. And birds were just such an important thing to her. She had a crow that would come peck on her house when it wanted food.
Cool.
And she always fed the hummingbirds, you know. And I have hummingbird tattoos because they're for Grandma. But they sang all night, and they sang every bird song. And I remember thinking, you know, Grandma has not had her hearing all spring. She has not been able to hear the birds, and they've come to sing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there we go.
So
It's so.
when it got daylight, the birds left, and Grandma did too. So, and we were all right there with her.
So they came to take her home.
They came to take her. Yeah. And so now when I moved to this town in December, and I got to tell you, I haven't seen a lot of mockingbirds here, but there are some little birds called catbirds. I don't know if you know what they are, but they're just like mockingbirds. They sing other bird songs. And this town is full of them. Cool. Absolutely full of them. So, and I see mockingbirds quite often, and like I was driving to town the other day and one flew across my path, and then all of a sudden Grandma was with me. Like it just flew right in front of my car, and like she just rode to town with me. And then my aunt was in there too. She's like, "Oh, I'm here too." Her sister, because I would take them everywhere. I was like the chauffeur for my grandma and her sisters.
But it sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, anytime, and so that time when Grandma passed away is when things started really being like opened up. I started seeing the numbers, the angel numbers. Mom started seeing them. My aunt would see the 1, 2, 3, 4. My sister does too. My mom and I would see angel numbers, and there were things like she cleaned the bathroom floor, there'd be a coin in the middle of the bathroom floor when she went back in there.
Wow.
You know, chairs started pulling themselves out, and you would push it back in and pull it back out. I mean, just stuff like that all the time. And last summer, Mom and we went to the graveyard, which is a tradition for my family. We do the grave keeping. We go and clean the stone and decorate at least once a year. So usually more, like 2 or 3 times a year. And we're keepers of that. And that was something Grandma was real big on. And then we promised that we would do for her. And so we don't just do it for her, we do it for everybody that she took care of too. And
Wow.
yeah, I mean, so Mom and I were at the cemetery, and my brother's buried there beside them now too. My Uncle Tony is buried right between my grandparents. They buried him between them. They put him, and he died before they did. And when we buried Grandma there, I have a cousin that's preacher. He came to do the service, and he said, you know, I'd been out there a million times with Grandma. He told us, he said this has been such a place of sorrow. He said let's let it be a place of peace. And so it is now. It's a place of peace there. It had been. I have watched Grandma grieve so much over my uncle's death. That was her baby, and so there's been a lot of sadness. But you know, it's switched now. It's flipped. After Grandma passed away, it started to flip, and all that sadness has. I think it magnifies the joy that we have now. And Mom and I started to tell this 3 times now, I think. Mom and I were out there last summer, and we were decorating, and we stood there afterwards, and we were I was like, look, Mom, there's a cloud. It looks like a hummingbird. And so we were standing there looking at it, and we watched that cloud morph into about 6 different hummingbirds while we stood there and watched it.
Wow. And
I was like, yeah. Thank you, Grandma. I mean, so those messages, you know, and when and I'm always looking up, looking down, always looking at the sky, looking at the ground. I'm always finding crystals on the ground everywhere. I've got tons of tiny little crystals everywhere. Just I find stuff all the time. And the clouds are there's always messages, and I see so many things just scrying the sky. And
Yeah.
I'm just, I, everything's just so open to interpretations now that I wouldn't have even considered before I came into Lightworkers Lab and started
No.
having other people tell me, this is what I see, this is what, and I was like, oh, boom, 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 boom. Just start
Yeah.
flipping all these switches inside of me. Oh.
Was
So,
that? Oh, that was your earbud. I
yeah,
was
it's
like,
my
what was
earbud.
that?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
my earbud.
Not a
Oh,
hummingbird,
do
right?
it again. No, it's a hummingbird.
No, but it might be your grandma pulling them out.
Yeah, grandma. She's like, shut up, Cathy.
No, not at all. No. I was going to ask you, well, there's a couple of things. Did your grandma pass? How long ago did she pass away?
It was in 2005.
Oh, okay. So you started noticing things like the angel numbers and the messages in the clouds before joining the Lightworkers
Yes.
Lab?
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I mean, I love that that's something that's regularly talked about in the lab, and like a cloud watcher. I've always been a cloud watcher myself and love looking at that and coincidences or things that I always thought were coincidences and the angel numbers and things like that. And it's so refreshing to find other people who also do that, because sometimes the people in our lives are kind of not in that same space.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, whatever. Although I have started reading angel numbers to my husband when I've seen them, and I think it's so fun to hear his reaction, because he's like kind of battling between, does this make, linear, 3D sense, or, but then he's like, wait, that really does sound like you. It's like, oh no. See, now that noise you hear in the background, that would be somebody cooking upstairs.
Awesome. Dinner's done.
Yeah. But what I love is how that timing just played out. Talking about angel numbers, and then, hello, we're here.
Yeah.
But the number itself isn't really, it's like 1:05 our time. So, but anyway, okay, they've taken care of that. Thank you. The house is safe. Awesome. All is well. My other question, what was my other question? Well, I have many. So, do you have more you want to say? I'll save my question for once you shared all that you want to.
After I got in the lab, I was invited by a daughter of a friend of mine. So that's how her name's Michelle Johnson, in case she ever sees this. Hi, Michelle. I love you so much. I've known her since she was a little girl. So she invited me to the lab around the same time my mom got into essential oils, and my health started improving. I got off all my medications that I had been on forever. So I was able to do that with the help of not only the essential oils and doing things differently there, but through, I think, just my work and my spirituality, and realizing that so much of what the pain that I had was, part of it was not even mine, because I have the empathetic senses that I pick up other people's pain, and their emotional pain will cause me physical pain. And that's actually part of when I do readings. I will feel things, and then I'll feel things in my body. I'm like, what is going on here? And then I'll be asking into it and find out what it means and what they need to do. What's a solution for that, which has been really neat. So that I figured those things out during the intensive. Yes, this year it was mind-blowing for me. It opened up so many things that I'm still amazed at what's going on. It's incredible.
It's a whole other level. So those of you listening, if you're not familiar with the Intuitive Intensive, it was the second year that has been offered, and I think it improved. It was great the first time around, but the second time it got even better. And so if you have the opportunity, I think Crystal has posted something somewhere about the 2020 intensive to just stay tuned, or maybe she's started a list, I'm not sure. But if you're interested, I took it as well. Cathy Sue made it farther down the road than I did in the prescribed amount of time. There's still time for me to go back to those things, which I very much plan to do. It's been calling to me lately. But Cathy Sue went through all of that, and it's just, there's so much information, and it's very eye-opening in many, many ways, and channel opening.
Yes. Yes. And I'm still going through information. Like I have PDFs that I printed out. I don't know if anybody's taken a class with Crystal, but she has like awesome PDFs. She's a PDF queen. I have a book this thick that I've made out of those PDFs, and I still am going through that information. It will take me years and years to get all that integrated.
Oh yeah, she provides the kind of thing that's like, you can read it the first time and it's kind of like, okay, but you always have to go back and
changes.
Read it.
Yes,
it does. It evolves.
Absolutely.
And it integrates, and it's amazing. Yes, very much so.
Yeah, every time you go back to read something, you're different, so your interpretation of it changes as well, and the way you're able to utilize the information.
Yeah, it's magic in some ways.
Absolutely.
Many ways. Yeah. Well, the question I was going to ask you is one you already answered, is how you found the Lightworkers Lab. So it sounds like Michelle is the one who, did she just tell you about it, or did she say, you have to do this?
she's like, I think you'd really like this, Aunt Cathy. And I said, okay, I'll check it out. And so I did, and it's been on ever since. It's like, yes, like the whole world. Like, I mean, I've adopted 2 kids. I've moved. I own a house. Bought a house. Excuse me. I've done things that I'm just totally amazed that I've been able to do. I wouldn't have believed that I would be where I'm at right now, right this second, sitting here in this house doing this with you, Megan. It's
well, and was this a part of that big shift when your grandmother passed, or was there some kind of aha moment? I mean, the 12-step program, as you'd mentioned, is another thing that really seemed to help you become more connected to the spiritual side of who you are. Were there things that happened during that time that you connected, from a higher self or the source aspects that have really stayed with you during that time? Or was it more of a very general connecting to a higher power?
I think, it was general. And I never was one to put God in a box. I just couldn't do it. I always felt like there was just so much more than this. Everybody's like, well, this. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah. And I always felt like everybody's beliefs were valid. And I was like, why can't God be all these things? Why can't all these things be right? Why is your way right? I mean, I would question. I'm like, why do you think your way is right and this person's not? I mean, it's all valid. I know, I've always felt that way.
I love that. I mean, what I heard from that is that what really may have transpired, maybe you were a questioner beforehand, but it sounds like, especially when you started making these connections, that you started really honing in on those questions, and which I would imagine then may have connected to the things that you talked about earlier in your life around religion, especially, and that dogma.
Yeah, the second that somebody was like, well, just knowing that I did, because the way that when I was raised around that, the idea was that you couldn't believe anything else. That was your only choice. And I still, somewhere in my head, felt like that was my only choice. And I couldn't do that. So I was just kind of stuck. And you gotta realize I live in the Midwest in a little area, and there's I'm not exposed to a lot of things. So I didn't have other information to even check into. We didn't have Google when I was little.
Not at all.
When I was a girl, there was no Google. And so it was just, I was so isolated, I didn't understand, oh, well, I can believe something else. It just never occurred to me that I thought this is what I was born into, this is where I am, and this is what my choice. But I couldn't do that. I could not conform. I just couldn't do it.
Well, that's the whole that's where that question came from, is somewhere you said you were pretty compliant, or I don't think you used that specific word, but as a little girl, right? You know, you did what people told you, and most kids, in order to get by, if for no other reason, do what they're told to do. Um, but at some point, that nonconformist aspect really started to shine. And you talked about, you know, your journey in your 20s as maybe being a part of that. You didn't say this. I'm wondering if that was a part of the I just can't conform anymore, because you were, it sounds like before then, trying to live that life of a young mother and in a small town and be that person that maybe everybody else expected you to be.
Yeah, and there were a lot of expectations heaped upon me that I just could not meet. I just couldn't. It just wasn't, it wasn't in me at that point. I mean, there was a time when I wasn't capable because I was I was just so lost, insane. I was lost in my mind. And, you know, when I was about, I would say when I was about 12, I was diagnosed with having seizures. But I probably wasn't having seizures. I was probably, they were saying they were epidural seizures. I was probably out, like somewhere in the ether. But they started giving me medication, and it really shut down anything that I had going on before that. So things slowly started opening up. Then what we call coincidences, the synchronicities throughout all of my time in recovery. I have some women that know me well enough, they're older than me. They kind of took me in. When I came into recovery program, I was the youngest. There was nobody my age. I mean, there just wasn't. There was no, now it's really common. But when I did it, there was nobody. So they kind of took me in and kind of like took me under their wings. I don't know, maybe it was like a project. It's like, okay, this one's pretty wild. Let's see what we can do with her. But
I wonder if they just wanted to help, like you have wanted to help, and, you know, kind of pay it forward in that way.
they were so sweet to me. You know, I always had a place there, and I still do. And some of those women, they are so sweet to me. And one lady, I told her what I was doing now. I was explaining to her, and she's like, "Oh, Cathy, that's just so perfect for you." It was when I was going through the intensive, and I was telling her I was doing readings and the thing. She's like, "That makes so much sense. That is so perfect for you," because I've always had that. I just knew things, you know. It used to be kind of just funny, like, oh, Cathy knows, you know, like a joke or something, but I really do. And now I understand with the confirmation that I get from people when I've done readings that I really do know things. Yeah. And I really am psychic, and I really do have abilities. And the more that I work with them, the more profound the things that happen are.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
I would never have been able to do that on my own, I don't think. I think I really needed the guidance and the considerations toward me doing that I've gotten here in the Lightworkers Lab.
Like validation.
Yeah, and just that it was okay to do that. Just
and
somebody
permission,
that the energy to put into that and maybe let the laundry set was well worth the time.
Yeah.
And I made that, I'm okay with that now. Like, just getting out of the environment that I was in let me be able to do a lot of things that I could never have done before. So just getting my own space and making my own rules again, and I intend on keeping it that way.
Yeah.
And
well, I was thinking about just how important I think that's really important for somebody who does have a tendency, and I'm saying this coming from a really similar perspective in a lot of ways to what I've heard you say. So definitely, if it doesn't fit, you know, take what fits and doesn't, let go of what doesn't. But that sometimes it's maybe the best setup is to be able to make your own rules and to be able to create your own definition of what a quality and happy and joyful life is. And it's really hard to do that with other people who have their own ideas around that.
Yeah, people don't want to try and think outside of what they know to be true for them right now. It's hard for them to step out of that comfort zone, and I get it. I totally understand that's where they are, and that's okay. But I don't have to live there with that boxed in thinking. And to me, that's why it's just like a box. I think of boxes when they can't go anywhere. It's like you're just in there and you're just spinning, and I'm out of the box.
Yes. Well, and I find that so inspiring. As somebody whose box's walls are disintegrating around her, I never thought I had a box, and now it feels like a box, or has felt like a box. And now that box is kind of transforming and transmuting into something else because those walls are fading or expanding or doing something. And so it's so wonderful to talk to somebody like you who is out of the box, and you're doing what you want, and it's so, and you have so much joy and love in your heart, and it really shows in talking to you. It sounds like I'm wrapping up, but we still have 10 minutes. So I just want to, send you the love now.
I manifested my life as it is today. This was something that I manifested. I put that out there to the universe. I knew what I wanted to do, and I put some work. The things started opening up. It's just, when you do that, when you really feel that, and you know that that's what you desire, and you can feel that that's going to be yours, it really does become yours. My thinking, and I've become so aware of my thoughts now that I try to keep them in those kind of directions all the time. And I'm not trying to manifest $1 million. I'm trying to manifest a happy home, good relationships with people. I haven't, maybe next week I'll try and manifest $1 million. I don't know. But right now I am perfectly satisfied with what I have. And I'm so grateful. I live in gratitude every day. I'm not perfect. I get mad at my kids. I yell. I'm not the perfect mother. I don't want to sit here and seem like I'm this divine human being. I am Cathy.
You're human.
I am one badass chick, and I don't put up with crap. I'm not all running around all love and light and, oh, that's so great all the time. I'm not like that. I'm very regimented. I have things that I am trying to step out of. I'm trying to soften right now, really, because I've been so guarded for such a long time. And now that we're here, and me and the kids are here, and things are okay, and they're in school, and things are going good there, and I'm trying to soften. And to have fun again. That was my thing when I went to Bliss Retreat. I got joy as my word for Bliss Retreat. And
good.
Yeah. And so last year it was to be, my goal was to be fearless, to become fearless, really, truly fearless. And I think I've accomplished that in a lot of ways. Now my goal is to become more joyful and to lighten up and to let these be okay. I don't have to have everything perfect anymore. This is my life. This is my home. These are my kids. But just letting go of that pressure, I just letting it light and just flow off of me is where I'm at, and trying to learn how to have fun again and soften my approach because I often come off, I think, and this is just my opinion and view of myself, is that I'm kind of a bitch. And I know you probably don't think that, but
I haven't seen that at all.
People that have been invasive into my space and not respectful of what I'm trying to do, they see it. So I'm trying.
And good.
Yeah.
Because that's boundaries, that's protecting your space, that's dominion,
Yes.
And so those people may not like it, but it's a good lesson for them.
I hope so. But I can hear Grandma saying she would always make an excuse for somebody as to why they were the way they are. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at. I'm trying to see people in different in a different light than I usually look at just where they are instead of maybe why they are that way. And to allow them to be where they're at. Like, oh, I mean, in every situation, not that I have to tolerate it, but to just understand that that's where they are and to not just be agonizing over things that I don't have any way of changing.
That's so hard sometimes, especially if they're people that are close to you in some way. And it's a really great practice because it helps with like a loving detachment of sorts. You know, it's like you can love them, but you don't have to own their stuff. And I'm practicing that a lot lately too. But I also think, I mean, I think it's challenging, all the things that you've talked about in a good, enriching, you know, way, but the whole giving yourself permission to have joy and to find and to have fun. It's hard to do that because there are all these habits of thinking and being around the protectiveness that you had, that guardedness you'd mentioned before. So that's a transformation in a big way. And I'm so happy to hear that you're doing that and you're aware of it and you're being conscious about it.
I came home from Bliss and I drug out all my art supplies. They had still been packed and started working on some artwork and doing some things that really, really center me and bring in a lot of peace into my heart and just make me feel so good. And it's just really, really helpful. Like, time flies when I'm doing that. It's like I'm in a trance. Like, I'll look at the clock and it's like, oh my gosh, it's 3:00. Where did the day go? I mean, so it's that kind of thing. It's like time just disappears when I'm doing that stuff.
Well, and you're tapping into your creativity again, too, which really helps to center, I think, especially if you've had to be the, you know, kind of problem solver for a long time and really taking life seriously because of it. This is such a great way to really open that up. And I'm so happy to hear you're doing that. What kind of art do you
Well, I
play
do
with?
a little bit of everything. I do silly things. Let's see, I've got some stuff here. I do
Good.
just let's see where I do just little silly things.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if you can read it,
Super
but
cool.
I
I'd love
can't.
to read
It's
it.
so tiny.
It's backwards.
It says, "I just know." I just know.
Excellent.
So I do things like that. I'm really into goddesses, so I've used the Madonna a lot in some of my art. But it's just stuff like that. I made this, a stuff of faith, just little things. And then I just started. Right now, I was doing some painting. I've done some little clay figures. I just do whatever feels good, and whatever I find on sale in the clearance rack at the craft store. That's the modality of my artwork for the near future. So I have tons of craft supplies. I buy big bags of old jewelry and tear all of it apart and use the beads for things. And
can I just say that I find that really consistent with who I see you as, and that person that you had said you don't fit into a box. You refuse to be defined by any one thing, and I love that about you. So I just think that's so cool.
I look at things and I see the potential in just anything. I just try to, and especially with my creative mind, it just starts. I have what I think is a problem-solving mind. And so with the creativity, it goes immediately into, it's like, oh, I could use that for this, or I could do this, and I could paint it, and I could put these things on, and I could decoupage some words on, I just start going through all this stuff, starts going. So I have like this creative burst. Oh,
well, yeah.
that was
but what
perfect.
I know it is. It's like I have all these bells set up, but I never know what's going to happen when they go off. And so it's divine timing in a way. Well, so we have about 3 minutes left, and I am just so thankful that you came on the show, Cathy Sue, and shared your amazing story. And I'd love to have you back on, and I'd love to display your art when you're ready. So say the word, because I'm totally ready for that. For those of you watching, I am. So thank you. I think I said thank you, but if I didn't, thank you so much. All right, everyone, have an awesome, mystical, magical weekend, and thanks again.